Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. I hope the week's gone well. Macro thoughts, I like this quote that Jonathan Ferro tweeted. We underestimated just how ferocious the UK consumer can be. And that's after a second upgrade to UK GDP by the Bank of England. I said from the very beginning that I thought this huge devaluation was going to boost the UK economy considerably more than the uncertainty around Brexit. Only Switzerland retain a negative 10-year yield, while the French 10-year yield is above 1% and Japanese 10-year yields above 0.1%. And that goes back to my piece in September last year, Mirrors on the Ceiling, the pink champagne on ice. And I was basically saying there was a blow-up coming in the bond market. And certainly it's already started. Capital outflows from China accelerate to a whopping $725 billion last year, says the IIF. And that's pretty extraordinary. And I think that's what's supporting Bitcoin, which has become a proxy for Chinese capital flight. A struggle for land and survival in Kenya's restive highlands, France 24, Laikipia, Kenya, the broad plains of Mwigi, a huge estate on a high plateau northwest of Mount Kenya, are crisscrossed with cattle trails, and the wildlife is mostly gone. The knee-high grass remains, but not for long, reckons the manager Josh Perrett. Tensions between semi-nomadic pastoralists and settled landowners are nothing new, nor is competition between livestock and wildlife. But in Kenya's central Laikipia highlands, they are taking a destructive, sometimes violent turn. Last month, perhaps 30,000 livestock arrived on Mwigi, displacing wildlife. The illegal herders, some armed with spears, others with AK-47s, cut through fences, making off with wire and posts. The shooting, looting, poaching and rustling that accompanied them left Perrett despondent. 20 years of time, effort, sweat, money, it's fallen apart in 2 weeks, destroyed, says the 35-year-old. Before, you would see elephant, a few hundred head of buffalo, Jackson's hartebeest, oryx, Grant's gazelle, impala. Now you see thousands of head of cattle, a lot of sheep and goats. At the 44,000-acre Suyan Ranch, south of Mwigi, thatched huts for tourists were burnt down and shots fired this week as herders swept in. Black and white landowners alike speak of invasions, fear, and siege. The dangerous situation in Laikipia is an acute expression of a chronic and complex tangle of population growth, livestock increases, overgrazing, erratic rainfall, climate change, weapons, money, and politics. And look at this photograph from Laikipia invasion, elephant shot by illegal grazers in Laikipia, at least 4 bullet wounds and a broken leg. And this elephant, we met, a bull elephant, blocked our way in the forest in Lewa many years ago, enormous fellow. You could smell him on the air, and he was just feet away from us. Another photograph of Hannah, taken in October 2015 in the pool, just under 2,000 meters above the sea. This is in Borana, which is in the north. Another photograph of the snow peaks of Mount Kenya and some elephants. Again, I took that in Borana. So it's very, very tragic, and I'll come into it in more detail in a bit. Truth is weirder than any fiction I've seen, Hunter S. Thompson. Buy the ticket, take the ride. Wow, what a ride. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. let me leave you with some two final home thoughts. One is from Judy Garland over the rainbow. The second is from Odd News from UPI. Hater dating app matches people based on mutual dislikes. Political reflections. The frozen conflict in eastern Ukraine has flared up again. Trump spoke with Putin last Friday. Two sides' readouts of the conversation differed. The Russian one said the two presidents discussed the major aspects of the Ukraine crisis, but the US one failed to mention Ukraine altogether. Putin must have liked what he heard or what he didn't hear, because the escalation quickly followed. Putin will pick up a spot here and there and test the West for resolve, said the former Ukrainian foreign minister. Moscow is checking whether its actions will cause more tension. Russia, Israel, China are all set, in my opinion, to push the envelope. Trump gently testing waters with sanctions relief amid anti-Russia sentiment. This is a video interview with Ron Paul on RT. And then take a look at this. Am I reading this right? Seems like some of the 2015 sanctions against Russia have been lifted. Of course, going back to that piece I wrote in December, we have a deviate tomahawk. My starting point is the election of President Trump, because hindsight will surely show that Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. Don DeLillo, who's a prophetic 21st century writer, writes as follows in one of his short stories. The specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in, a voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers of Colorado Command. We have a deviate tomahawk. We copy, there's a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We are clearing an outframe to locate source. Thank you, Colorado. It is probably just selective noise. You are negative red on the step function quad. It was a voice, I told them. We have just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee, laughter, and song with a quality of purest, sweetest sadness. Somehow we are picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. I have no doubt that Putin ran a seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference, which amplified the Trump candidacy. Trump was an ideal candidate for this kind of support. Trump is a linguistic warfare specialist. Look at the names he gave his opponents: Crooked Hillary, Lying Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb. They were devastating and terminal. The first thing, if you're doing such a program, is plausible deniability. The second thing is non-linearity. According to The Independent, Russia is weaponizing misinformation to create a post-truth age. In a sustained campaign of destabilization against NATO and the West, the Defense Secretary has warned. Speaking at St. Andrews University, Sir Michael Fallon accused Russia of using cyber attacks to disrupt critical infrastructure and disable democratic machinery. Putin is, as I wrote, 2015, a geopolitical grandmaster. Romania is witnessing its largest protest since the fall of communism. I wrote a piece in 2012 called The Madding Crowd, and I said in that there are plenty of flamethrowers in a population of 7 billion. And of course, one of those very flamethrowers I was thinking of was Steve Bannon, who's been appointed to the National Security Council. And this impetus seems to be best explained by Steve Bannon. I wrote, Trump's chief strategist and counselor. I'm a Leninist, Bannon proudly proclaimed. Lenin wanted to destroy the state. That's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down, destroy all of today's establishment. Bannon has been appointed to the National Security Council. And then this wonderful photograph, The Great Manipulator by Time. It's their new cover. The portrait is by Nadav Kanda. The Economist is calling Trump an insurgent in the White House. Washington is in the grip of a revolution. The bleak cadence of last month's inauguration was still in the air when Donald Trump lobbed the first Molotov cocktail of policies and executive orders against the Capitol's brilliant white porticos. He has not stopped, quitting the Trans-Pacific Partnership, demanding a renegotiation of NAFTA in a wall with Mexico, overhauling immigration, warming to Brexit-bound Britain and Russia, cooling to the European Union, defending torture, attacking the press. Onward he and his people charge, leaving the wreckage of received opinions smouldering in their wake. To his critics, Mr. Trump is reckless and chaotic, nowhere more so than in last week's temporary ban on entry for citizens from 7 Middle Eastern countries, drafted in secret, enacted in haste, and unlikely to fulfill its declared aim of sparing America from terrorism. In politics, chaos normally leads to failure. With Mr. Trump, chaos seems to be part of the plan. Promises that sounded like hyperbole in the campaign now amount to a deadly serious revolt aimed at shaking up Washington and the world. 14th of November, I wrote Trump was an insurgent candidate and his Make America Great Again movement similarly an insurgent movement. Traditional media has lost its position of control. It's been upended by the internet, which allowed insurgent politics to broadcast over the top. Trump Twitter bursts throw decades-old alliances into disarray. This week, Trump and his deputies hit out at some of America's closest friends, blasting a dumb refugee settlement deal with Australia, accusing Japan and Germany of manipulating their currencies. The president told Turnbull he had spoken to 4 other global leaders that day, including Russian President Putin, and this was the worst call by far, the paper reported, citing unidentified US officials. China has no idea at the moment how to deal with Trump and is taking a cautious approach, said Nicholas Thomas. The one question that everyone is looking at in the region, and this goes to the web of security partnerships in Asia, is what is going to happen between the US and China over the South China Sea. Then WAPO has a no good day mate on call with Australian Prime Minister. Trump badgers and brags. At one point, Trump informed Turnbull that he had spoken with 4 other world leaders that day, including Russian President Putin, and this was the worst call by far. Trump's behavior suggests that he is capable of subjecting world leaders, including close allies, to a version of the vitriol he frequently employs against political adversaries and news organizations and in speeches on Twitter. This is the worst deal ever, Trump fumed. Trump, who one day earlier had signed an executive order temporarily barring the admission of refugees, complained that he was going to get killed politically and accused Australia of seeking to export the next Boston bombers. And then the New Yorker's talking about Donald Trump through a loudspeaker darkly. Winston Smith, the protagonist of 1984, is confined in an authoritarian prison, deprived of the most fundamental freedoms and inculcated with newspeak. In my early childhood, at least, I remembered it. Everyone I knew lived ordinary, unmolested lives. The muddling of fact and fiction is a tried and true tactic of totalitarian regimes. What's more, when the two are confused for long enough, or when an indefatigable war on truth has been waged for a year or 2 years or perhaps 8, it will likely be harder and more tiresome to untangle them and remember a time when a firm line was drawn between the true and the false as a matter of course. If amnesia breeds normalization, fatigue is always served as the authoritarian's great accomplice. I already know what it was like to live in a world with an omnipotent leader in a renovated reality. I've known loudspeakers, their mass persuasions, emotional arousals, and booming, relentless broadcasts. And I know that they are not my destiny, because I won't let them be. My latest piece was actually about Trump again. I was writing about how he's turned up the volume up to 11. Then some observers attribute this, as well as Trump's haphazard tweeting and his fondness for confrontational or unsettling statements, to various forms of the Trumpian dark arts. Food prices rose to a 2-year high in January, pushed up by an increase in sugar and grains. Very big correlation between food prices and revolution. I don't need to mention that to you. FuseNet emergency food assistance needs unprecedented as famine threatens Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and Yemen. Let's move on to the markets. Euro dollar 107.50, dollar index 99.92, bounced off that key level of 99.50. Dollar yen 113.15. Swiss franc 0.9934, the pound 125.25. The Aussie, which has been on a bit of a tear, 0.7649. India rupee 67.385, back below 68. South Korean won firmer as well, 1146.75. The Rial 3.1238. Egyptian pound 18.37. That got a bounce. South African rand firmer as well at 13.3916. Put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. 99.50 remains the key pivot for this little puppy. Euro dollar, Navarro has put the euro on notice. He's not happy to countenance a much weaker euro. We're now at 107.51. Gold prices back on the move, 1213.33. Still like that Bitcoin short, long Bitcoin short gold trade. Crude oil, $54.24, getting a bit of a bounce this morning. But 60, as I said earlier in the year, will be the cap in my view. Very interesting piece in Africa Confidential calling Trumpsville, Washington's radical changes in policy and alignments are starting to hit African governments and economies. Saying until the outgoing chairperson of the African Union Commission, Dlamini Zuma, told the organization summit in Addis Ababa on 30th January that the United States travel ban on 7 countries with Muslim majorities presaged turbulent times. The continent's reaction to Trump's presidency had been muted. The best guess among many African officials was that the lack of any reference to Africa in Trump's election campaign, bar a sideswipe against his rival Hillary on Libya, suggested there wouldn't be big changes in US policy. That now looks mistaken, especially on migration and security. As Dlamini Zuma was sounding her warnings about the Trump government's entry ban. The ban includes AU members Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and although it was introduced as a security measure, many officials now see it as a prelude to a wider crackdown on immigrants in the US, particularly the millions of undocumented people living in the country. Estimates of how many Africans fall into that category start in the low millions. Warnings will not have overly concerned retired General Michael Flynn, Trump's national security advisor, who takes an extremely robust view on countering Islamist movements, armed and unarmed. He set these out in a book, co-authored with historian Michael Leadin, called Field of Fight: How We Can Win the Global War Against Radical Islam. Among policy ideas circulating in Washington, we hear, is placing the Muslim Brotherhood on the US terrorist list. Such a measure would be warmly endorsed by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who has banned the Muslim Brotherhood where it was founded in 1928. El-Sisi was the first foreign head of state to congratulate Trump on his election win on November the 7th, yet his influence among some of the Trump team extends much further, particularly with regard to policy towards his western neighbor Libya. Talking about Haftar, credible reports of US military companies operating out of the Jinja military air base in Uganda to train more militia fighters in Libya. Haftar, who was once financed by the CIA to overthrow Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's regime, is following a script close to General Flynn's book. Michael Leadin takes Haftar extremely seriously, so let's keep an eye on that. And then talking about the reason why Sassou of Congo thought he might be in the loop, and turned out he wasn't. After the news leaked, it was announced that Trump, who was enjoying his Christmas holidays in Florida at the time, would have no scheduled meeting with Sassou. Peter Pham, who's likely to be the next Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, if Pham gets the post, US policy could harden against Congo-Kinshasa, where he wants much more pressure on President Joseph Kabila to leave office. On foreign aid, Pham argues for greater national self-interest, more rigorous monitoring. He cites a $110 million credit to Mali, which used the money for an energy contract with China's Sino Hydro. Compared to its $5.5 billion of aid to Afghanistan and $3.1 billion to Israel, the US aid of $10 billion for all 54 states in Africa, including $1.8 billion for Egypt, is far less significant on a per capita basis. Many expect that most aid budgets, except Israel's, will be cut. And then talking about Tillerson, as a long-time chief executive of ExxonMobil, Tillerson has a close knowledge of Africa's big oil producers, Nigeria and Angola. Meanwhile, ExxonMobil's director for Africa, Walter Kansteiner, in Washington recently is tipped for a senior job in government. And then Flynn, whom President Obama dismissed as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, wants robust backing for nationalist, anti-Islamist leaders in North Africa and the Middle East. So we're in for interesting times, and I was talking about this in January when I said a big signal about the shape of Africa Trump administration engagement is that we're back to a counterterrorism focus. US and its US AFRICOM has been advancing rapidly across the continent. I said we can surely bet the house that the advance will be now turned to 11. Kenya, like other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, receives as much as 50% of its inward remittances from North America. ET has estimated that more than half of our people in the US are not properly documented. Scenes that we have witnessed over the weekend at US airports does not bode well. DRC's main opposition leader, Etienne Tshisekedi, passed away. Concerns about the deal that was struck with President Kabila but not signed by anyone, I don't think. Ethiopia claims success in quashing wave of anti-government unrest. He insisted that Addis Ababa would not give opportunity to any party to block the fast-growing economy and the attempt or efforts of the Ethiopian government to change the lives of the people. The government educated the youth and there was not enough employment, so the extremists used this fertile ground to incite violence. Mr. Lencho said authorities had detained more than 20,000 people for training on the Constitution since the protests erupted, initially over land disputes in 2015. He said armed groups and terrorist organizations bent on regime change, most of which were overseas and which he did not identify, were no longer able to incite violence because of the restrictions on demonstrating and access to and use of social media. But he gave few specifics, apart from the creation of a forum of political organizations about how the government was addressing people's underlying frustrations to ensure the protests did not re-erupt. They're worried that if they give an inch, they won't be able to control the fallout. Mass arrests, which Mr. Lencho said fell into two categories: protesters who needed training for a few months and people considered more hardened criminals. Initially, about 11,000 people underwent training, of whom more than 8,000 have been released. A further 12,500 have been incarcerated for training in a second wave of detentions. No figures have been given for the total number of arrests, but activists believe it's more than 50,000. October 2016, I wrote, Ethiopia's reputation shattered by political tensions. I quoted Kapuscinski, "You don't understand a thing. I'm not writing so the details add up. The point is the essence of the matter." And I said the government needs to change tack and effect a course correction. And history shows us that this course correction is one of the most difficult things to pull off. It took 39 fires before Ford recalled exploding SUVs in South Africa. In the US, it took 0. South African all shares up 4.08% this year, dollar versus rand. The rand is firming 13.3916. Egyptian pound firmed as well, 18.372. The Economist is talking about Nigeria's foreign currency shortage. And very interesting article, worth having a read. And this goes back to something I wrote, the fundamental paradox at the heart of President Buhari's government is the Naira. Investors are sidelined, waiting for President Buhari's moment of epiphany. Nigeria heads to London and the US for its first Eurobond since 2013. They're looking at doing a 15-year dollar bond. Nigerian all share down 3.49% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange up 5.98% this year. Geologists have discovered a lost continent beneath Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Fantastic story, all to do with zircon, interestingly enough, which is one of the components of titanium ore. Laikipia ranch invasion sparked friction between Kenya and UK. The UK High Commission sent an update to its citizens on Tuesday, detailing a festering bout of insecurity in the area. Put up a photograph of 2 male rhinos that we took at Lewa Wildlife. The drought has been a problem for years, but people have been living peacefully. This flare-up is because of politics, said Francis Narumbe, a local chief of the Turkana tribe. There's political incitement, he told Reuters. Let me put up a photograph of my dearest Hannah in the waiting room at Lewa. Some time ago, a link to an interview with William Roberts, who started off in Lake Baringo and then set up his place at Sirikoi in Lewa, which is in Laikipia. Another video of that area around Sirikoi Lodge. A comment by interviewed Ian Craig, who's the founder of Lewa. There will be a way, there always is, he said. Look at the interview I did with Ian a little while ago. Kenya shilling firm at 103.81, Nairobi all share. 3-day winning streak, down 7.43% this year, going to pop higher today as well. So it'll be a 4-day winning streak. Same thing with the NSE 20. They're both down. NSE 20 down 11.08%. Sasini is set to sell its restaurant chain, Sasini Coffee House, for 17 million shillings, $700,000. Sasini is down 1.041% this year. Tea prices are at 3-year highs. Coffee prices are doing well as well. Once again, I wish you a tremendous weekend, and I thank you for stopping by.